Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Ask Mike. Courtney Mims alongside Mike Irwin. It may be Memorial Day, but we still got a segment for you guys. Still got to do the show, and we have a jam-packed show, so we are going to get right into it. Are you ready to go, Mike?
I'm ready.
I'm ready as well. We're going to start off with softball. The Arkansas women losing 2-1 to Texas in the Super Regional this past weekend. A big disappointment, but Margaret Tooley-Roach says, what a wonderful season. Y'all are truly a group of amazing young women. Couldn't be prouder of all of your accomplishments. Razorback softball fan for life. Woo pig.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment and a good thing to start off with, because you do have to honor this team, even though it was bad and it didn't go the way you want. You got to look at what was accomplished, because last year they took some steps. There were some firsts that had never happened before. And we all heard in the offseason, hey, we're going farther this year. Well, they did. They won an outright SEC championship. But then on top of that, they won the SEC tournament, and they just dominated that tournament. They never really were in trouble in that tournament. So they're clearly the best team in the SEC, and the SEC overall is probably the best softball conference. Might not have the best team, but they're the best overall conference. So they did that. That's an accomplishment. Then you win your first super regional game. That's another first. And then I would say a first is the size of the crowds. They've never had crowds like this before.
No, it's definitely a first.
And when you look at the way that those crowds went, I can see them maybe having to expand Bogle Park, figure out a way to put more seats in there. Dave Van Horn, in a preseason press conference, after it was over, we were talking to him, and he was saying some things that still need to be done over at baseball.
Yeah.
But he said, you know what? Softball needs to be next. They need some improvements over there. So I think maybe he probably knows things that I don't know. And I think that may be Hunter Yurichek's thinking. Look, it's a phenomenon now. It's given us another sport this time of year to pay attention to that wasn't there until now. And I can see where if this thing keeps like it's going and they do get to Oklahoma City, let's say they win a national championship and get their program going, then you got another thing that's this time of year that people will be watching, paying attention to, regionals, super regionals, giant crowds. So it really looks like they're going places. And so this was a good next step. Now you just have to take the third step next year.
You've got to get to the Women's College World Series.
You've got to figure out a way to take that final step and get there. And then there's another step, get there and win it.
Yeah, exactly. But I like that it's moving in the right direction.
Sure.
We're not taking steps back. Courtney Deifel and her teams aren't taking steps back. They're moving forward.
And you're adding fans and a larger fan base, and you're probably going to get some additions to your facilities. And so it all looks good. Oh,
it definitely looks good. Well, John Royer asks, were they that good, or did we beat ourselves talking about Texas?
Okay, now this is the reality of it. This is what happens. It's what I talked about last week that my dad always told me. When you compete, you will get people like this, and this doesn't mean this is a bad fan. He just wants an honest answer to a tough question. Yeah. And I think it was a combination of both. I think what happened in Texas' case is they played over their heads. They did that the week before in the regional and beat Washington. They've been a team, if you went back and looked at Texas, they made a lot of errors this year and hurt themselves. Well, they kind of cleaned that up, and they had really good pitching, and they had the hitting when they needed it. What happened here was that everything was going good after that first game. Then you get to about the middle of game two, and there was a big momentum change. And then I think from that point on, what I saw from the last half of game two and all the way through game three, Arkansas's hitters, who had been really, really good, became undisciplined. And I think it happened because they were putting pressure on themselves and they were too anxious.
Yeah.
When you've got that many people and you know they're there and you don't want to disappoint them and you're behind, you get over anxious. Gee, there's a runner on base. There's a runner on third. I have to make something happen here. And we see what happens with the men's team in these situations.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, they're undisciplined. They're swinging at balls in the dirt. They're not barreling up balls that they normally hit for line drives or home runs. They're just not quite doing it. And I saw that over and over. And honestly, in game three, it got worse as the game went on. You could see it. You could see how all of that was affecting these girls. This isn't a problem with them. This happens all the time. It's a part of sports. But it's something to me that Courtney Deifel can talk about in the off season, the girls that are coming back, the girls that are coming into the program. And when you get to this level and you've got that many people in the stands, You have to have the discipline to enjoy the fact that they're there, but not let it change you.
Yeah.
You still have to take your same approach to the plate. You can't get over anxious. You got to be loose. You can't let that team that's coming in that doesn't have anything to lose be looser than you.
Yeah.
You got to say to yourself, hey, we're the same team we were all year long when we were beating people in this situation, so we're not going to let it happen to us this time. And I think that comes. I think that's what you get from an experience like this.
Yeah.
You can use losing to be better next year.
Yeah, you definitely can. And Courtney Deifel even said in the press conference after that last game when it was very emotional, she said, I think the pressure got to us. You know, I think it got to us. And it did.
They've never been in that situation before.
They have not. And so it is a lot of pressure when you're expected to go up to the plate and make something happen. And it doesn't happen. I think we saw that with some of their best hitters, like Lenny Malkin.
Yes.
You know, I mean, we just didn't see the same Razorback softball team we've seen all season long. And that's what pressure can do. Big-time pressure can do that in these situations.
Right.
So, anyways, we're going to move on, and you're always going to get a few comments like this one. Ryan Landers says, I see. It's just another sport Arkansas chokes in. Jeez. Can't catch a break. Oh.
This is a common theme with Razorback fans, a part of the fan base anyway.
Yes.
And this goes all the way back to coming within one fly ball catch of a national championship in baseball. This comes all the way back to '69 Texas game here when you have Texas beat and then somehow they win. You know, the '95 national championship game in Seattle where you're favored, you should win your second national championship, but you don't. And all of these times when teams should have done something and they didn't, and it's just a part of sports, there's a part of the fan base that believes Arkansas. They used to call it the Curse of Nolan. After Nolan got fired, anytime a team came so close but didn't do something, it was Nolan cursing the team. It was idiotic.
Wow.
But it was an explanation for the frustration that a lot of fans feel because it just seems like Arkansas always comes close but doesn't actually do it. So now, join the club, softball. You're now a part of that. You're now a part of all this other stuff that happens. But the only way to change that is to actually win it all. And look, there are teams how many times did John McDonald win it all? How many times has Lance Harder won it all?
Yeah.
How many times has, Nolan won it all once and almost won it again? Frank won it. You can win national championships here, but that's a pretty high mark that you have to achieve just so some of the fans don't say, well, it happened to us again,
I mean, the season was great. You can't throw away what they were able to accomplish this season. You have to look at the positives, and you really do, because otherwise you're going to get into this national championship or bust kind of mentality.
This national championship-itis. To me, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that pressure. I like the fact that you have that to talk about. Would you rather have never be in that conversation, not having that conversation? Well, you want to be Missouri and you don't ever get to do that. So I don't have a problem with this. I think you got to be a little lighthearted, and I don't have skin in the game like those girls did. I didn't go through emotionally what they did because I'm not down there working out the way they did in the off season, put all the effort they put into it. So it's easy for me to say, don't worry about that. But I think you still have to do that. You just have to look at it and say, hey, that's not bad. That's good.
Yeah, well,
next year, we're going to be the team that doesn't do that, doesn't go close and get close and not make it.
Exactly. I think this only fuels the fire more for them because they wanted it. You heard them all season long say that was their goal, to get to the Women's College World Series. They fall short. It lights a fire under this team to get there the next year and lays the foundation. I think that's what you got to look ahead to. Well, Bacon's Rebellion says, I'm still annoyed by all the empty seats at the softball regional. What if season ticket holders were penalized priority seating points for the next year on unredeemed tickets? At least that might motivate donors and businesses to get the tickets used through an exchange or some other way. I actually kind of like that idea.
It's not just a problem with softball. Obviously, this happened in baseball and even happened some in football. I don't know what the answer there is. I don't know if the athletic department would ever do that. I would say this. The only problem I saw was on Thursday night.
Yeah.
The weather wasn't good. I will say the number one thing that keeps people that have tickets not going to use those tickets is if the weather's bad.
Yeah.
A guy told me one time, and I'm not trying to pick on women, he said, it's my wife. She won't go in bad weather. So when I get up the morning of a game, I look out the window and the weather's bad. I'm going, nope, we're staying at home. Now, maybe it's that way with some guys too, but the point is, bad weather will keep people who have tickets at home. So it wasn't, the weather was kind of cold that night, and you weren't sure if it was going to rain. And then it was also a weeknight, which people have to get up and go to work the next day. So a lot of times it's easier for them to stay home, and it's on TV. So you can stay home, and there are people who have enough money. See, I'm a cheapskate. If I paid for those tickets, I'm using them. There's no way. But there are people that have so much money, they just go, I would pay for it. I don't care. I'll just stay home and watch it. So I think that's what happened on Thursday. Friday and Saturday, the crowds it was almost packed. Yeah. You might have seen a seat here and a seat there. I noticed they have these reserved seats back there, and I'm not sure what that was, but maybe it was some official thing that came in there, an Ncaa official or somebody that had to have a seat and then they didn't show up. I don't know. But I'm not sure it was just corporate tickets not being used. I think there were just a few on those 2 days. The crowd was good. That's what I'll say. Yeah. I didn't see a problem with Friday and Saturday.
Well, the crowds were record-breaking, so they've got to be good. I mean, you have to look at the positives there in that situation as well. The crowds were good. They're going to keep coming. They're going to keep getting better. To baseball now, where at Mousetown wants to know, what do you think about Arkansas's draw in the NCAA baseball tournament?
Now I'm going off.
Oh, I know you are. I'm excited.
I don't have any problem with Arkansas not hosting because they went downhill. We all saw that coming. It's not like it's a big shock. I have a problem with the horrible job the selection committee did overall. It's like these guys just sat down and went, let's get this over with, and they paid no attention to anything, or they got too involved in these stupid metrics and ignored the obvious. Now, look, I want to preface that. I want to first say this. If they had to go on the road, this is the place to go, Stillwater, Oklahoma. It's close. Hog fans can go over there, and there'll be a lot of them over there, so it won't be like being at Baum, but at the same time, there'll be some of your fans there, and we know from history Arkansas has reached the College World Series 6 times at some other regional, starting at some other regional. They've only done it 4 times at home, so the odds are still with you.
Yeah.
It's not a disaster to go on the road as a 2 seed, and the last time Arkansas went to Stillwater, they won and then got to come back here because whoever was over in the other regional lost, the number 1 seed lost, and so then the Super came to here. So maybe that'll happen again. I think it's
the Chapel Hill regional.
So North Carolina.
So it would be North Carolina.
So maybe North Carolina gets beat and you beat Oklahoma State and you come back here for the Supers.
Could happen.
So that part of it is okay. And my complaint is not about Arkansas not hosting. It's the terrible job that the committee did. First of all, let's take a look at Auburn. They finished 5th in the overall standings in the SEC, 5th. Do the standings not matter? Do you come up with these dopey metrics that mean more than how you played? Give me a break. So they finished 5th, but they go and Arkansas doesn't. I mean, LSU finished ahead of them. They didn't host. But it's worse in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Listen to this. I'm going to read this. In the Big 12, TCU won the regular season championship. They don't host, but Texas does, and Texas finished 5th. First doesn't host, 5th place team does. Explain that. Oklahoma finished ahead of Texas in the regular season and beat them in the Big 12 tournament. Texas hosts, OU doesn't. What are you doing there, guys? What you're doing is saying, I had one of these national baseball guys that got on and said, it's metrics, it's metrics. Well, that's a fancy word for we've created something that we think is really cool and it's really stupid, dumb.
Yeah. Like look, RPI as well?
Yeah, well, that RPI is part of the metrics.
Part of the metrics, yeah.
And it's just this dope. Let me explain something. When high school has it figured out more than you do at this level, you are stupid. Here's what happens in the 7A West. I think they take the first 3 teams. That's the way. It may be up to 4 now, but I know they took the first 3 teams. And so it's cut and dried. If you finish first, second, or third, you go into the playoffs. Where you play, whether you play at home or go on the road, is determined by finishing first, second, and third.
Right.
So it's cut and dried. There's not some bunch of guys in a room, bringing in tacos and stuff and, having smoking cigars and just throwing it up against the wall and going, let's do this. It's down there because why? Because they've played each other. They've all played each other.
Yeah.
The various teams in the 7A West have played each other, and so they have a result, and the team that's higher gets the better seeding, and if you don't finish high enough, you don't go. And that's how they determine it. It's not like one has to go on the road and 5 gets to stay at home.
Right.
They don't do it that way because that's stupid, okay? They were doing that 52 years ago when I played high school football in Texas. You told me, however, in Florida, dopey Florida, they don't do it that way.
No, they got rid of the districts.
And they're doing metrics.
They're doing metrics. Yeah, they do it based on strength of schedule and things like that.
Strength of schedule. If you're playing the same people, who cares?
True, but you're not always. That's what it gives the teams, at least in Florida, an incentive to play, higher up classes and bigger schools, which I think is ridiculous as well. But
in Alabama, when I was in the military and I was working at a TV station in Dothan part-time while I was in the military and covering high school football, and this was 1972, the referees voted. The referees voted on teams that got into the playoffs. They sat down and they said, okay, they're going. So it was a high school version of the selection committee, which I hate selections committees. So they don't do it this way everywhere. But what I'm saying is when high school football in Arkansas gets it right and your fancy NCAA selection committee for baseball gets it wrong because there are a bunch of guys just in there messing around,
yeah.
It makes me angry because there's nothing more telling than how you finish in your own conference when you're comparing what you did to other conference teams. I don't think Auburn deserved to go, and that doesn't mean Arkansas did, but LSU finished ahead of Arkansas. I'd have less a problem if LSU went. But the problem is it probably should have gone to a team in another conference, that hosting thing.
Well,
why do you have to have 4 SEC teams or 3 or whatever when you look at it and you pick one of them that was, 5th, and you're going to say, yeah, but metrics. I just don't like metrics. I don't even like that term. It makes me mad.
Well, sometimes they use RPI and sometimes they don't. Look at NC State, who, had that push at the end of the season and looked really good, and everyone said, well, they didn't even get in.
Yeah,
they didn't even get in.
I know.
So,
so it's not just an Arkansas thing. It's not just an SEC thing. The committee just blew it.
Yes.
And I would, if I were college baseball people across the country, ADs and stuff, I would go to the NCAA and say, you get rid of those. This is one more black mark against you, NCAA. We're already thinking about dumping you because you've been a worthless organization in the past. You're starting to try to get your act together. Well, do something about these committees. Don't just bring these guys in and let them do whatever they want, and then when it's all over, you go, hey, bye, guys. We'll see you again next year. Tell them. These are the standards we expect. Go in there and spend some time and come up with an actual smart bracket that reflects what actually went on during the season and in these conference tournaments. Don't have Texas, the 5th place team in the Big 12, host when the champion doesn't.
Yeah.
Makes no sense.
Makes no sense. It's like these conference championships don't matter. They didn't care what happened in Hoover with the SEC baseball tournament. No, they just don't even look at those.
And the regular season should matter a lot.
Yeah.
And in this case, look how badly they got it wrong.
Yes, they did. Well, moving on now, Alex for Hogs 88 wants to know, what are your thoughts on the comments that Derek Ruskin made about Michael Turner? It seems to me he crossed the line. What ramifications do you believe these comments or behavior towards any student athlete may have on the future of recruiting of Razorback baseball?
Okay, this is a very complicated subject. It's going to take us a while to delve into this, and we're going to talk about some things I didn't talk about last week when this sort of came up before. When you have in this case, last week you had a head coach referring to fans, a portion of the fan base causing problems. Now you've got a player that did this. So it all started with Michael Turner, who was in a post-game press conference after they lost to Florida, and he was asked to sort of explain what's been going on with the team since they've regressed and what do they have to do to get out of it. And what he said was, well, we've got to pull together in a tighter circle. We've got to shut out all this social media stuff and just focus on ourselves. And it was a sort of a repeat of what Dave Van Horn had said earlier.
Yeah.
And I was pretty negative toward that last week. But Alyssa Orange knows Connor Nolan's mom.
Yeah.
And she told us about something that happened where his mom has been getting not comments that you and I would see on Twitter or Facebook. These are private messages that are sent.
Yeah, direct messages.
And over the top. And it definitely could affect Connor that they're sending this stuff to his mom. I think it's terrible that a baseball player would have to endure something like this. I also don't know what you can do about it. You know, it's tough. So Derek Ruskin, though, is reacting to Michael Turner basically bringing up social media and fans, even though Turner was very careful to say this is just a small part of the fan base. He was reacting to Turner saying that. His point that he was making is, if you're Michael Turner, you should be talking about the things that you can do, the things that you haven't done that have been causing this to happen on the field, and things you can do in the NCAA tournament to turn it around, not talk about the fans. But his comments were, and everybody has their own idea about what's over the top. I understand that that sports talk radio is a different animal. It's a genre that's not like what we're doing right here.
Right.
We're more conservative on television. You're more conservative in print. Even these internet websites like Rivals and 247, they have a responsible fan base or people that watch them, and so they're a little careful. But people that listen to sports talk radio are kind of used to this kind of edgy thing that you do.
Yeah.
And I have been on sports talk radio many times. I'm not currently, but I've done it before, and I altered the way I do things some. Now, did I go this far? Let's talk about what Ruskin did. He made very pointed comments toward Michael Turner, basically called him a rental player, which is you come in for a year from the outside and you're only going to be here a year, so you don't have any skin in the game, and how dare you come in here and criticize our fans when you haven't even been around, and you don't know what our fans are. That might have been okay, but then he called him a stupid ASS and some other things. And to me, yeah, that's over the top for me. I would never do that.
Yeah.
But other people, I've been reading the reaction to all this, because what basically happened was Derek Ruskin got suspended by the people he works for.
Correct.
I assume he'll be back at some point. But
Maybe.
Maybe. I don't know what's going to happen, but he was suspended. And so that is the answer to that. And people that have asked me what I think about it, I personally say I'm in the media. Am I the best judge of what somebody else in the media does? Do we judge ourselves?
Yeah.
I don't think we're very good at that. I don't want somebody to ask me to evaluate the other television stations in this market or the radio stations or whatever. I just worry about my own job. And to me, it's up to the people that employ you to determine whether or not you're doing the right thing in a media outlet, whatever it is. So I don't have any personal comments about what he did. The station stepped in and disciplined him, okay? That's the way it works. I want to respond to the other part of what was asked, which was, is this now causing a problem with recruiting? Because that part concerns me, because I've been reading these comments.
Yeah.
And here's what you have. You have a certain segment of the fan base, which everybody's got to have these guys. They're what I call the opposite of the crazies. They're so loyal it hurts. They're never going to criticize anybody.
I like those guys.
And they're good. That's fine. But what a lot of them are doing now is saying, see what you guys are doing. You're causing, it's going to hurt our recruiting. Nonsense. Arkansas fans are not over the top as a group. And even their nutty fans are not over the top as a group. You were telling me about Mike White at Florida.
Oh, yeah.
Why? I didn't know this. Tell everybody why he left.
Well, there is a rumor out there, and it's been thrown around many a times. You can go and find it, that, the former head basketball coach, Mike White at UF, left because his family was getting harassed. His family, his daughter and son, I believe he has a daughter and son, or sons, were getting harassed at school in Gainesville for how his team was performing and what he was doing, where it was getting so bad that they were getting bullied and all these things that he said, I've got to leave. I've got to get out of here. So that's the Florida fan base.
And I would argue that you've got that stuff everywhere, but it's probably not nearly as bad here as it is at most places. So I don't like this idea that part of Arkansas's fan base is now trying to point fingers at the other, because this is not a bad fan base.
Yeah.
Now, let's address these over-the-top things. This whole thing where somebody's sending a message to your mom, could that actually affect Connor Nolan? I could see where it would.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about that? It's so frustrating. It's almost like you don't have an outlet. But we're going to pop up a couple of comments or tweets that were put up by ex-Razorbacks. If we can go to the first one of those, we've got that.
Yeah, I think we have the comments. The first one from who's the first one from?
Ryan Costu.
Oh yeah, that's right.
There.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's what he had to say about the Ruskin thing. As a former Razorback rental player, as you like to call it, I, like others, understand exactly what guys on the team are going through and completely understand their take on the fan base on social media. And then he goes on to say, describing an athlete in the way you've done will never be considered good journalism, and you should be ashamed. As a player, I received multiple messages on multiple occasions via social media suggesting that I should be dead or receive bodily harm based on my performance. Okay, we got another ex-Razorback, Eric Cole. I don't think I'll ever forget all of the people telling me to end my life during the national championship, grow up and treat these kids like human beings. I promise that some of the stuff you say can stick with them for the rest of their lives. And I think we have one more.
Maybe.
Is there another one?
No,
yeah.
It doesn't look like there is.
Okay, that's the last one. All right. Look, that kind of gives us another look at this thing from a player's perspective. Yeah. I still say that for the most part, there's nothing you can do about it. You have to just deal with it. And maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe that's what Michael Turner was talking about. I do think that if you are a player that this affects maybe more than just the typical player, yeah, maybe if you're the coach, you say, hey, we need to send you to talk to somebody. Get some therapy about this.
Yeah.
Because you can't let this affect your performance. Now, there are people out there, and I'm kind of an old school guy, I would tend to say, well, what a wussy, don't let these fans bug you. But sometimes we can go over the top with stuff like that. Sometimes people can actually have serious issues.
Death threats and bodily harm is, I think, crossing the line quite some than just saying Razorback baseball.
Well, you and I were talking about this earlier. I believe that you have a remedy. Now, I got one of those kind of threats several years ago, and I did something about it. And the cops went and dealt with the guy, and he never did it again. So sometimes you can find these people. They're not always anonymous on social media, and you can find them and you can do something about it. I felt like that crossed the line because he was talking about coming to my house, and I'm not even there at night. I'm at work, and I had kids at home at that time. I got my wife and kids there, and this goober's talking about coming to my house. So I felt like I had to do something, and I did. There's a difference between that and somebody saying, well, I just think you need to go off somewhere and die. How do you deal with that? Again, I acknowledge that somebody might not be able to handle that the way somebody else would do it. Now, I just mentioned, this Auburn thing. Remember what I said about Auburn? They don't deserve to host?
Yes.
Okay. Will Moclair, who of our staff, just came in a few minutes before the show. He said, boy, this Auburn fan's all over you. Well, I don't care. You can post anything on Twitter that you want to. You know what I'm going to do when I see that message? I'm going to delete it. I don't care what an Auburn fan thinks, and it's not going to affect what I do. So that's how you deal with this stuff if you have the ability to do it. If you don't, hopefully get some help. Talk to your coach, whatever.
Yeah, I think there's a line, too, where Auburn fans are coming for you on social media, but you've done this long enough to where you're like,
I had Kentucky fans after me one time for 3 months. And what I did, every time I saw it was one of those,
you just said
delete,
block, and block. Delete and block. That is,
and eventually it just went away.
That's how you got to do it, especially, we have haters all the time. We put ourselves out there, a different way than the players do. I just think it goes over the top when you start name calling and then you start going down a line of, okay, well, do we really need to say those comments, or can we just say, I disagreed with Michael Turner's comment? If you disagree with the comment, can you just come out there and say, I disagree with it, rather than going down the line of, hey, I'm going to start calling names, I'm going to start doing that whole thing. And especially, you're definitely crossing the line when you're messaging players' moms and parents and telling them, hey, go off and die kind of thing. That's terrible. I hope your son, dies. That's terrible. That's terrible stuff.
So we've addressed these over-the-top wackos and pretty much suggested that there's not a whole lot you can do unless they're actually directly threatening you.
Correct.
So the best thing to do is either go get help if it bothers you, But if it doesn't bother you, if you're somebody like me, I just go, and get rid of it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So there's that. Now I want to get to the other part of the fan base that I feel like this throws shade on. These are the people that I don't think are over the top and have a right to be critical when things aren't going right.
There you
so
go.
You read what
yeah,
the next
so
one is.
we have some of those negative comments, but not maybe over the top, because Bierman says, not so bold prediction. Hogs have 2 games left and finish 38-20.
Okay, he's not criticizing a player or a coach. He's not attacking anybody specific. He's saying, this is my reaction to the fact that you crashed and burned at the end of the season, lost your final series, and I think they lost the last 2.
Last 2, and then
you went to Hoover and crashed and burned. So I just think the same thing's going to happen. Now, why does somebody post something like that? My dad told me this years ago, and he wasn't talking about social media. He was talking about comments fans make. He said, you're sitting up there in the stands, and you're watching this, and you can't do anything about it. It's not going the way you want, and you're frustrated, so all you can do is complain, and that's what you do. Now, he may be using sarcasm, or he may actually figure they're going to finish 38-20 and lose the last, what? That would be...
Yeah, the last 2 games?
That'd be the last 6 games
6
of the year,
games,
something like
yeah.
that. So I don't have a problem with this. He's expressing his opinion. He's not attacking anybody.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it either. We have another comment, Not Too Bright, says, we do not hit to the opposite field well. We do not hit with runners on very well. And we do tend to rely on the home run too much. If that is hater status, then add me to it.
And he's reacting again to the fact that these type people get ripped on, so they get ripped by other fans about not being loyal enough. I don't have any problem with what he said. I don't even think what he said was wrong.
No, I don't either. I think that's actually a pretty good comment from Not Too Bright.
I don't have a problem with a fan making a personal observation of what he's seen and what he continues to see. Again, there's some frustration here, but he's saying, hey, this is what I see. We're not going to get better till we correct these problems.
But he's not calling out anybody specifically in that. That's a team comment, which I think is, what we're getting at here. Suey Hawk says, this is not Razorback baseball, and I expect the change is coming. That change is coming. No way a good coach like DVH will just accept
Now, again,
this.
some people might consider this negative, but I consider it a good question or a good observation, because that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
They could have a miracle turnaround and win the College World Series. Stuff like that's happened before. And then all of that would be irrelevant. Well, let's say that they don't do well and they don't get it out of a regional. Then in the offseason, Dave Van Horn's going to have to make some tough decisions. He's going to have to try to figure out what went wrong. I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know if there's staff changes. I don't know if some players get told to take a hike. He's got to bring in new players. He's got a new recruiting class coming in, but he's also got guys coming in from the portal that he's going to have to bring in. So all during the offseason, even into fall ball, he's going to be asked anytime he's around the media, what are you doing to fix this? Mm-hmm. So that's what this question deals with.
It was asked that today as well, heading into regionals. How you guys going to turn this around?
So in the offseason, that will continue to be a question. You've established a standard here, and if they don't do well in the regionals, then you didn't live up to that standard. How do you get back on track? I remember that one year Arkansas finished like 10-game losing streak, and people were just shocked. Yeah. And they were like, what happened here? And then there was an immediate turnaround after that. So Van Horn has a good track record of, if you do happen to have a really bad end to a season, he's got a good track record of coming in and making corrections.
Yeah.
So that will be something we'll be talking about if they don't make it out of this regional.
For sure. And we have some positive comments, too. We got to go over the positive ones.
Because those people are part of the fan base, and you need them.
They are part of the fan base, and they are lovely comments. I like these ones. Scott Alexander says, still love him no matter what. Hopefully they climb out of it. That's a very positive comment from him.
So you need those type of fans, but I think you need the ones we just heard from. What we don't need are the wackos.
Yeah, the wackos. I like
the private message, over-the-top Twitter goobers who are not really feel like they are accountable to anyone. Those are the fans we want to ditch. Yes. And I don't know how we do it. And we may have to have a Twitter police, and I will put you in charge.
That's fine. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to delete and block. That's what we're doing. Delete and block. Well, T.L. Slayton asks, don't you think we are better off coming home early from Hoover? I actually kind of agree with this.
Yeah, once you lose that first game, it's kind of a risk. I suppose you could come back and win a couple of games and get to the championship game. But usually what happens when you lose the first game, you lose the second one. And then what are you going to do? You've lost the second one. Do you try to hang into the loser's bracket and end up losing it? You know, if you win the second one, then do you try to avoid, how quickly do you lose the second one again? And so you can get wrapped up in Hoover and use up your pitching and all your energy. And then you come back home, and the next thing you know, you got to go hit the road and go somewhere.
Yeah, you tire out your arms.
We'll see next week on this show whether or not this observation is correct, but I would say right now it could actually be a good thing.
I think so too, especially when you're using as many pitchers as Arkansas did in those 2 games. You know, you don't want to tire out those arms. I really don't think you want to go through and tire them out. So, like Dave Van Horn said, they can rest up, they can recoup, and hopefully it does help them when they go to regionals. To basketball now, where the big story, Jalen Williams' decision to go pro. As Giles asks, how much will Jay Will's departure affect the team next season? I'm going to miss that big smile and all the charges he took. That was fun.
You know, I think they'll be fine. We see who's there. We've seen what they're going to have. It's going to be an almost entirely new team, but really good perimeter players. And they're bringing in 4 bigs, but bigs that are not big stand under the basket, push people around guys. These are all mobile 6'9", 6'10" guys. And one of the differences I think you're going to see with this basketball team is you've got all these perimeter guys that know how to get the ball to other people. They can not only create their – what makes you dangerous as a perimeter player is that you can score yourself either by hitting a 3 or going off the dribble. But if you also have the ability to spot somebody – and get it to them, and then they've got an easy layup or a dunk, and that's where these bigs are going to come in because they're very fluid. They're quick, they can move, they're big targets. So I think a lot of this is going to be perimeter guys going, and then dunk.
Yeah.
And so would it be good to have Jay Will back? Well, what he would do is he would be an experienced player in that position. It might help those other bigs, but you run into a position where you got too many. And here's the thing. He did what he had to do. He evaluated. He got good, apparently good word from the draft people. Hey, you will get drafted maybe early second round or whatever. You're going to make some money, and you've got a future. So he did what he had to do. Now yes, we will miss. He's one of the most popular players ever because he's local. He's not just local Arkansas. He's local around here.
Yeah.
And what did he have? He had that big smile. We all liked it when he took the charge and got back up grinning, or when he had a dunk and he came down the floor grinning. You like players that play rather than all serious, man. He's having fun out there.
He was just having fun.
I used to have a good friend that grew up across the alley behind me. Knew him from the second or third grade on. Where I came from, guys got in fist fights all the time. We had this big pit that was outside of town that they'd used to dig caliche, which is what they used in the early days to put on roads and stuff. And they had this abandoned pit, and it was down in the ground, and when you drove by, you couldn't see who was in there. So instead of getting in trouble and fighting somebody in the hallway, you'd challenge them, I'm going to whip you, and then that you would arrange to meet them
in
at
the
the pit
Oh, that's
after
cool.
school. So they have all these fights in the pit.
I like that.
You know, and so, you know, this friend of mine, he would beat guys up and he would be smiling. He would be fighting and he would be smiling. He did that in football games. He'd just plow over somebody as a linebacker and then he'd be smiling.
Just grinning.
There's something about a guy that's doing something very physical, but he's really enjoying it. And that's what Jay Will was. He was just a fun guy to watch. So we'll miss him. But good luck, and the team will be just fine. I think they're going to have a great season.
Oh, yeah, I think they're going to be fine, but we will definitely miss watching him. I know I will. Moving on to football, Archie Redneck wants to know, what's your assessment of the start times for the first 3 football games this coming season? Those morning afternoon games in early September are brutal for the fans at Razorback Stadium, especially those north end zone seats. I feel him on that. Whew, It's hot.
I think Arkansas is starting to get a little more respect because we went through this period where we always got the 11 a.m. game. That's the worst because especially early in September, the game is starting when it's just starting to get hot, and then you transition into the hottest part of the day. So that's the worst, those 11 a.m. games. So we've only got one of those in the first 3. So you start off early September, first week in September, and you got a 2:30 game. Well, it's going to be hot.
Yeah.
But you're transitioning from really hot to it'll cool down as we get toward the end of the game.
I like
so that's
that.
not too bad.
I like that.
And the sun will be moving a little bit, so it'll be all right. The second game is the 11 a.m. game. Okay, that's not good, but it's the second week in September, and you cross your fingers and hope, okay, the temperature will drop off. I've lived here a long time. Usually by the second week in September, it's starting to cool off a little bit. Might not, because we can't always predict the weather. But I'm going to sit here right now and say, yeah, that's going to be upper 80s, not lower 90s or mid 90s.
Oh, nice.
So you can deal with the 11 a.m. into 2:30, 3 o'clock if you start off in the upper 80s. So maybe that'll happen. And then the third game is at 6 o'clock, and you're later in September. It's really starting to cool off, and it's a night game. So I think that'll be perfect.
That's going to be the best one.
I think that's Bobby Petrino coming in.
I think that is too, and that's going to be a good one.
That'll be fun.
That's
so,
good.
To me, that's good news on these start times. Again, I thought they're going to hit Arkansas with a bunch of 11:30 games, and that stinks.
Yeah, well, they didn't, so that's great.
Just got one of them.
Yeah, just one of them is what we'll take at this point. Ashton wants to know, do you think KJ Jefferson has a legit shot to win the Heisman Trophy in 2022? And if KJ improves even more this year, do you think he could be a good QB in the NFL? Arkansas hasn't had many QBs succeed in the next level.
Joe Ferguson's the only one that I can think of that was there for a long time. Here's KJ's chances for the Heisman. He will have to play well, but it's going to have to be more than that. Arkansas would probably have to beat Alabama and maybe win at least 10 games. Yeah. If they do something like that, and he's a big part of that, I think he's got a shot. But the team has to come into you talk to anybody that's a Heisman voter and anybody that's familiar with that, they always say it used to be the best player in the country, and it wasn't always. Come on, it was usually prejudiced based on the higher number of electors in certain places.
Yeah.
But, it's pretty much evolved these days into the best player on the best team. There are exceptions to it, but you generally have to be on a pretty good team. So Arkansas, this is going to have, what he does in terms of Heisman is going to have a lot to do with not just what he does, but what Arkansas does. Can he make it in the NFL? I don't know. I just really don't know. You've got this thing where we always talk about it, the transition from high school to college to the NFL. Nobody knows how somebody's going to transition. It might be good. I think what happens this year, how he plays this year, maybe have a lot to say about that. But I would hesitate to sit here and predict how well he's going to do in the NFL. I will say Arkansas needs a quarterback to go into the NFL and stick and win some stuff. It would be terrific if we had a quarterback from this school who was in the Super Bowl. That would be great.
That'd be awesome.
I said, it's been since Joe Ferguson was all the way back in the 70s, 80s, that he was in for 17 years and was a really good quarterback, and we need another one, and we just haven't had it.
Yeah. Oh, it would look good for recruiting too. To have someone for these guys to look up to.
That's what really helps. It helps to have anybody in the NFL on your team, but if it's the quarterback, I think that really helps your recruiting. I agree.
For sure. St. John asked, do you think Ricky Stromberg is really the number 2 center in the country for 2022? I saw where one of those sports websites listed him there.
Well, how would you know that? These are preseason predictions. I would say this: if he ends up on a list like that at the end of the season, then that's good. It'll mean Arkansas's had a really good year. It doesn't hurt to have somebody on a list like that. It makes people start think. I think it helps recruiting, helps keep your name out there. I don't know if he really is, but I'm glad whoever it was did it.
That was nice of them. I want to know what website that was, so we can read that. The Hawk Hawkins on Twitter says some random SEC sports website claims there's a rumor floating around that Arkansas is using an NIL collective to offer Arch Manning $2 million to sign with us. They say it ain't going to happen. Arch would never come here. Truth or baloney?
Well, it's truth that Arch Manning would never come here. Because they're not even recruiting him. Yes. So how's he going to come here when Arkansas is not recruiting him? And he's not coming here. He has other options, and he's going to go where he goes. The idea that you've got some big shot that's going to offer him $2 million, I think that's baloney.
$2 million. Well,
first of all, again, I checked with Otis. I always check with Otis on recruiting. He assures me that they are not recruiting Arch Manning. Arkansas landed this kid out of Georgia run-pass quarterback. I've seen video of this guy. He's really impressive. He's a K.J. Jefferson lookalike. He's got an arm. He can read defenses. He can pass. He can run. He doesn't just have straight line speed. He can move left. He can move right. He can stop. He can start. And he has good peripheral vision. He can sort of see things happening. You can see this in these various videos that you watch. You can see him move from here to over there. You can see him when he passes. He's looking here, all of a sudden somebody's open there. So this guy's impressive. And he's their future quarterback, believe me.
Great.
That's the guy. They've already got a commitment from him. I'm sure he'll sign come, hopefully in the early period. So that's their quarterback, not Arch Manning.
Yeah.
And then Otis tells me, and it makes common sense, that if K.J. Jefferson leaves after this year and doesn't come back for his senior year and goes to the NFL, he thinks that Arkansas will try to bring in another Felipe Franks type, a guy that has made it somewhere else, but for some reason
didn't work out.
He's going to hit the portal, but he's really experienced. So you could see a repeat of that, because you don't want to bring this kid in from Georgia and make him play as a true freshman. You let him sit a year, which is what Jefferson did.
Yeah.
You sit behind Franks and you learn from him, and then look what happened when you get your shot.
Yeah.
So this story is ridiculous.
So we're saying baloney.
Finally, and then it turned out that it wasn't a collective, supposedly. It was some big guy with money. Now, I talked to a lot of people about Arkansas. This is the number one thing our fans do not understand. Just because there are rich people like the Waltons and John Tyson and the Hunt family and all these people that have money in this state, Warren Stevens and Little Rock, just because there are people in the state that has money doesn't mean they just go around throwing money at athletics.
Yeah, it doesn't mean they give
That's a misnomer. It's a misbelief. John Tyson basically kind of likes golf and track and things like that. He's not a guy that just throws wads of money at football. I think he goes to games, but I don't think he's all into that.
Okay.
The Walton family, none of those people have ever been really actively involved in Razorback football. I think some of the higher-ups in Walmart, the people that work there, have been boosters, but they're not people that would give $2 million for something. So Hog fans need to understand this is not a school like A&M where you got all these oil people and all this, and they're perfectly content to try and buy a national championship.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I hate NIL so much is because if this stuff isn't stopped, here's what A&M and other schools are going to find out. When you buy players, they have no loyalty to you. They're coming in here to your school because of money.
There's money.
First time a problem develops, I'll just go get more money from this other school.
Yeah.
They're not coming in here to win because they like your school or because they like the tradition.
Yeah.
They're just doing it for money. And I like the fact that at Arkansas, they're continuing to recruit athletes who are coming here because they like the coaching staff, because they get here and they look around and they go, man, this would be a great place to live. I like this town. Yeah. That's how you win, by getting people to come in and play hard for you because they like being here, not because you threw wads of money at them.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head right there with that answer, Mike. Team Otis says, congrats, Mike, on being inducted into the Arkansas Sportscasters Hall of Fame. Congratulations, you deserve it. Do you have any favorite memories from covering the Hogs, and what advice would you pass on to future sportscasters? Great question.
My favorite memory, and I had to think about this a little bit because there's a bunch of them, but the best one's probably one of the first ones I have. But to explain it, I got to go back a little bit and explain how I ended up here. I was working in Texas. There was a guy at the CBS station in Fort Smith, and I was talking to him. I was very frustrated because I was covering some high school teams in my job down there, but I also covered the Cowboys on weekends and the Texas. And I didn't like pro ball. I didn't like the attitude of these pro athletes. And I've always preferred college athletics. So I wanted to go somewhere where I could do that. I'm talking to him, and he said, man, this is a weird state. He said, everybody loves the Razorbacks, but he said the sports writers just kill it. Because the TV people, there's not a single television station in this state that has a guy on the ground in Fayetteville. What they do is they drive up on Mondays, or they come from Tulsa. The number one sports guy in Washington County in those days in Fayetteville was Chris Lincoln from Tulsa, Channel 8 over in Tulsa,
Wow.
the ABC station. That's who they watched. And he would come over once a week and load up on interviews. Everybody else would do that. And then they run it throughout the week. Well, by Wednesday, the stuff is old.
Yeah.
And the guy told me, he said, these sports writers have fresh, good stuff every day, and they get it from Frank and these other people. And newspapers are killing us. He said, I would hire you to do this. But he said, look, if I did it, it would be to make money up there. We got to get some viewers. And if you do it for maybe a year and it doesn't work, the job goes away. So I don't know what to do. And I didn't know a lot about Arkansas. I had a friend that was a Razorback fan. In fact, I had two buddies in college that they went to North Texas State with me, but on weekends, every other weekend when Arkansas would come to play football in Texas, if it was in Austin or Lubbock or College Station or Waco or Dallas, Dallas or Houston, wherever it was, they'd go there. They were always coming back and talking about these fans, these Hog fans. So I thought, I'll call them and ask them what they think. So I did. And they go, take the job. And I go, well, why? And they said, number one, Frank Broyles is awesome. I said, you don't know Frank Broyles. What are you talking about? You've never been up there. He said, but we've talked to their fans about Frank. And he's an open guy. He's really good with the media. You will like him. You will like dealing with him. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe. I don't know if they know what they're talking about. And the other thing they said, you will not believe those fans. We've been around them. They're terrific. So right off the bat, I do take the job, and right off the bat, that first year, I find out about Frank. Because I went to his office, and because my boss had said these newspaper guys are killing us. So I went into his office, and I said, look, I work up here. I live here. I'm going to be here every day. I want to do on television what Orville Henry is doing in newspapers. I want to have a big story every day, but I got to have some help here. I can't be walking around if you guys shut the door on me. He said, hey, the door is always open. And he backed it up. I could go to every practice, stay there for the whole thing, and bring my camera. And the only times he didn't let me shoot, he would come up and say, we're fixing to work on something that's a surprise for this game. Don't shoot this. And that was it. And every day he gave me stuff, or other coaches did, or they pointed me in other directions, and I had a really good story every day, and it worked out exactly the way my buddies said it would. So they were right about that. Now, the fans. Okay, so it's the first year, 75, that I'm here. What had actually happened was they had the 69 game. Everybody remembers that. The ABC network convinced Texas and Arkansas, who normally played in October, to move the game to December 6th to be the last game of the college football season. And it worked out. It was a great game, and it was 1 versus 2 and all that. So that year, 75, they told A&M and Arkansas, you're going to do this, and they both went along with it. Well, the Aggies come in to War Memorial as number 2, and Arkansas is like number 19, heavily underdogs, but it's a big game, and it's a night game. Now, I've got a guy named Fred Jordan from Camden, Arkansas. He's a college student. He's a paid part-time intern. We have interns here.
Yeah.
This guy was getting paid part-time money, but he was invaluable to me because he knew the history of the school. He knew all this stuff, and anytime I had a question, I would ask him. So now we're on the way down to Little Rock for that game. It's a night game, December 6th, 75. And all the way down, he's just telling me it's great. You're not going to. This is going to be the most amazing thing you've ever seen. When you get the Aggies coming in here, and they hate the Aggies, and they're number 2, the fans are going to go crazy. And by the time we got there, I said, "There's no way this game can live up to that hype. It just can't be what he says it is." Boy, was I wrong about that. First of all, the Aggies ran the option, I don't know if it was wishbone, but they ran the option. Arkansas just tore them up in the entire.
Nice.
They were losing 3 yards, 4 yards. Their option was going nowhere. And then Scott Bull threw a pass to Teddy Barnes right before the end of the half, 35 seconds left or something. He catches in the back of the end zone, 6-0. And then the second half is a total curb stomp. They just killed him. Oh. And then I'm watching the reaction of the Razorback fans after the game. I'm looking around going, these guys hate the Aggies as much as I do. I'm in a good place. So going back that night, and there was no I-49 in those days. People that went up Old 71 know what I'm talking about. You went up over Mount Gaylor, 1 o'clock in the morning, fog, you can't see where you're going, 2-lane road. And I'm thinking, man, I got to see some more of this. So honestly, when I talk about why I continue to do that job, that's still happening. They're still winning games like that. The Texas game here last fall was that. Fans going bonkers after that game. The Auburn basketball game in Bud Walton. Fans going bonkers on a national venue, Razorback fans showing the entire country there's nobody that gets into this more than we do. And it's why I continue to do this job, because my buddies were right. Those fans are people you want to be around. They'd never, and I still talk to them about it. I still thank you. You were right. I'm glad I listened to you. So that's kind of my favorite story. Now, advice to people getting into this business. Okay, first of all, you better be prepared to work some long hours, because it's not an 8 to 5 job. It's not an 8-hour job. You sometimes have to do what you have to do. And don't come into it thinking that it is a clock punching thing, because it's not. You probably either need to be unmarried or have a really understanding spouse, because if you're married, you're going to be away from home for a long time, a lot of hours, so you need that. You need a family that understands that you're involved in. And then I think the other piece of advice I would give you is, don't make your work about yourself. There are too many people in television that somehow confuse themselves with the people we're talking about. My dad always used the water pipe analogy. He said, a reporter is like a water pipe. Water runs through the pipe. People want the water. They don't care about the pipe. You don't see the pipe. You don't look under your sink. There's the pipe. Aren't you cool, pipe? No, they don't pay attention to the pipe unless it breaks. So keep the pipe unbroken. Make sure it's maintained.
Like it.
Stay out of sight, and put that information through there, because who you're covering is important. You aren't.
That's
the best advice I would give them. Do not try to become the star of the show. The star of the show are the coaches and the players and even the fans.
I love that. That's a great piece of advice. I hope any young broadcaster is listening to that. I'm going to clip that and even share that, because that's great advice.
I would charge for that advice.
Okay. Well, you're going to charge me for that advice now?
No, anybody that comes to me, I'm going to start a service. You come to me and I'll give you advice on how to do your sports broadcast.
Okay, I'll give you 10 cents for it. How about that?
Okay, that would be good. You can go buy me a Coke when this is over.
Yeah, I'll go buy you a Coke with my 10 cents I have. Yeah,
it costs more than that.
It costs more than that now. It's 2022. That's all the time we have today on Ask Mike. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next Monday for another episode.